So thank you so much, Shazia. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello. Test 1, 2, 3. No? Hello.
All right, so we get an opportunity to test all the mics,
All
and they
right,
go.
okay,
So over to you.
I got this. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, thank you. Those are the youth right there, huh? I see the older ones are on this section. But hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Unfortunately, I can't dance and I can't be as energizing. That was a false promise. But we have a thought-provoking session for you today. Each of us in this room have been affected by the weather changing in our lives. Whether it's the raging wildfires that we're hearing about in the Commonwealth, somewhere there in Canada and Australia, or the landslides in Pakistan and Bangladesh, or right here in my house, in my home, where we have huge floods and very close by huge droughts, putting 15 million people on the verge of starvation. No challenge poses a greater threat to us as young people, our children, and our planet. Climate change, ladies and gentlemen, isn't just a little problem somewhere there. It is a problem right here. And similarly, reimagining sustainability isn't just a fun, sexy exercise. It is an exercise that is about saving our civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you today on this very strong note. My name is Shazia. I'm the founder of an organization called EJO Leaders. EJO's goal is to identify exceptional young grassroots leaders like yourselves in the audience and to be able to upskill these young leaders to join government and to influence and shape the policies on which their futures depend. And today, I'm so honored to be here with you and to be able to share this space and bring to you an esteemed line of speakers and panelists coming from the private sector, the social sector, the public sector, really to discuss this issue of sustainability and of what the future holds. So without further ado, we will start with a welcome to our keynote speaker, and we will then follow on with the panel. Our keynote speaker is a woman called Honorable Sarah Nyirabashitsi Mateke. Honorable Sarah is the current Minister of State of Youth and Children Affairs in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. She's also the Woman Member of Parliament, Kisoro District in the 11th District. She's not strange to the political arena, having previously served in the 9th Parliament in the same capacity. A retired seasoned civil servant, Honorable Sarah worked in Kisoro District for 10 years in administration, which forms a very strong part of her drive and her resolve. She's also the current chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the Metropolitan International University, Kampala, and the chairperson, Board of Directors of Makerere Metropolitan Management Institute, Kampala, as well as other campuses. So please give a warm, warm welcome to Honorable Sarah. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Did you people have lunch? I thought I'm talking to youth. Good afternoon, everybody. I think I will stand on the existing protocol that had already been pronounced here. But on a special note, I would like to recognize the members of parliament from Uganda that I found here. Members of parliament from Uganda. And of course, the National Youth Chairperson, Eyeru, I think I saw him here. Those are the people I work closely with. And of course, my other colleagues, members of parliament, ministers for youth that are representing the Common Youth or represent the Common Youth Task Force. I want to bring warm greetings as Commonwealth and from your sisters and brothers from the Republic of, or the Pearl of Africa, the Republic of Uganda. I wish Honorable Rosemary was here. I wanted to be very grateful and to thank them for having given us this opportunity to host the Commonwealth, and of course, thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, for having given us this opportunity and for the hospitality that we have enjoyed from the time we arrived here in this very beautiful and clean environment of the Republic of Rwanda. I am happy to speak to you on the sub-theme, Redefining Sustainability, under the overarching 2022 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which is themed as Taking Charge of Our Future. There is no better time than now for us as leaders to focus our attention, redefining sustainability as we do empower young people to take charge of their future or our future. For purposes of this keynote address, sustainability will be used as referring to a situation where meeting our own needs today does not in any way compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In addition to natural resources, we also need social and economic resources. It has become increasingly clear that young people have a vital role to play in reimagining sustainability and in the global battle against climate change, with over 60% of the Commonwealth's population being under the age of 29. They need to be considered as assets to development, spearheading the tackling of the global issues we are currently facing. In reimagining sustainability, we must create spaces whereby young people can meaningfully participate and influence the global climate policy agenda. The avenues must be created and maintained which allow young people to unlock their potential towards developing and advancing innovative solutions in tackling climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, this upcoming generation must be one of which is climate resilient, and education is key to the attainment of this objective. We need to increase opportunities available for children and young people to engage in research and development, which can drive the emergence of new solutions. Education plays an enabling role in empowering and building resilience of rural communities, our women, and marginalized groups who are often most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. In a similar way, we must ensure that support is granted to the developing countries in establishing coherent frameworks for the climate change education in the context of education for sustainable development. In reimagining sustainability, as young people, you must remember the fact that people, or the young people, are voters who can influence political directorates and consumers, who can drive private sector towards sustainability, and as creatives can lead the advancement of the solutions. If we are to build resilient institutions and societies which can stand the challenges of today and tomorrow, young people must be central agents within this process, both in informal institutional politics and social movements. Recent global youth-led climate change movements serve as an indication of their increasing concerns about the future of the planet and interest in the environmental issues. Someone made a statement where I was and said, suppose you went back to be 20 years, what would you correct? And it has kept ringing into my head. The moderator is the one who asked. It kept ringing in my head, and that is an assignment I'm giving you. Those who are still young, don't wait to be our age so that you can reverse what you can do today. You can do things today. You can take charge of your future today and now. Within this crisis also gives us a rise to new opportunities, which young people need to be able to capitalize on. Youth unemployment continues to be a prevalent issue in most developing countries, a situation which COVID-19 pandemic has certainly exacerbated. Majority of the world's 1.2 billion young people aged between 15 to 24 live in developing countries, in areas where dependence on natural resources and persistent poverty intersect. The green economy provides an avenue for better and sustainable employment opportunities for young people, but requires a coordinated and a multifaceted effort. Green growth can address the challenges of youth employment while simultaneously preserving the environment and increasing climate resilience. There must, however, be an enabling environment where young people are key players in the green economy transition. In doing so, we will, for instance, create more jobs for rural youth in sustainable agriculture, which will also assist in meeting our growing global food demands. Our policies, behaviors, and practices for environmental sustainability do impact on the people's well-being. We need to reflect on the need to reduce resource depletion and ensure better management of environmental risks, reflect on tools and instruments like standards, taxes, subsidies, and communication campaigns to put in place to ensure sustainable consumption and production. The Commonwealth has a very clear track record in contributing to the global climate policy and is actively engaged in building climate resilience in member states. Through the Commonwealth Climate Change Program, climate vulnerable countries are assisted in building the technical and institutional capacity and unlocking the potential of climate finance. Ladies and gentlemen, Commonwealth also helps young people to address climate change through the Commonwealth Youth Climate Network and the soon to be launched youth-led network focus on sustainability, which builds the capacity of young people to tackle climate change and to advocate for it from the youth perspective. As the chair of the Commonwealth Youth Ministerial Task Force, we are aware that the Commonwealth has launched a policy toolkit to help governments boost green and blue growth through youth entrepreneurship. This is something I'm telling the youth, please make sure you capture. The first of its kind, the toolkit was developed by the Commonwealth in partnership with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. We are also aware as ministers that Commonwealth Youth Program supports Common Youth Climate Change Network to host the intergenerational climate dialogues with decision makers and the youth climate leaders from across the Commonwealth. I'm trying to be brief because they gave me I think even the minutes are over. So, let me conclude. On both fronts, young people are demonstrating, that is climate change and COVID-19 crisis, the young people are demonstrating the ability to lead recovery efforts, and as multilateral institutions, governments, and private sector, we must remain ready to support the efforts for this vibrant generation. I believe that the Commonwealth must continue to use its convening power, partnerships, innovations, and advocacy to support and stand in solidarity with our most vulnerable and most at-risk nations who are enduring the worst impacts of climate change. We must continue to increase our engagements with young people as key agents in the development process as we seek to address the multiple threats to our planet and our people. At this conference, I end by calling all of us to reaffirm our commitment to use this window of opportunity to set the foundation of a new path, working closely alongside our young people to set a world on a different, greener, and more equitable and more sustainable course as we seek to build a better future. Let me end by commending the participants for this conference for their continued support and outstanding work towards developing sustainable solutions to tackle the global environmental threats. Now, more than ever, our planet requires your research and innovation to drive your ability to develop and advance resilient energy, biodiversity, and societal systems to ensure a sustainable future. I will leave you with two quotes, one by a former American president, J.F. Kennedy, and said, let me quote, things don't happen, things are made to happen. Then Steve Jobs, the Apple renowned innovator, had this to say, it is people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world who do. Thank you so much for listening to me, for God and my country.
Honorable Minister, thank you for adhering to the time guidelines. You have broken a record for ministers, I have to say. But no, thank you very much for your thoughtful words, for your encouragement, and I think the focus and the need to really double down on education and changing our minds about how we see the earth and how we see ourselves in relation to the earth is a really big thing that you've emphasized and I take back with me. So thank you for that. Now we're going to move on to a fantastic line of speakers who come from various different sectors to share some experiences around sustainability, be it in food insecurity and how climate change affects food, to how ecotourism can actually be an economic growth prospect for us. So without further ado, I will call on our panelists one by one, and if our panelists can kindly take a seat in order to start the panel. So our first panelist is Ariella Kajuruka. Ariella is the head of the Tourism Department and Conservation Department at the Rwanda Development Board. The office oversees tourism, regulation, promotion, and product development, as well as biodiversity, conservation, and management within the Rwanda National Parks. Prior to joining RDB, Ariella was the Director General of the Chamber of Tourism, Rwanda's private sector umbrella for travel, tourism, and hospitality companies. She also worked for 8 years in Rwanda Air, which we all are very proud of, being one of Africa's fastest growing aerospace companies, where she served in several managerial positions from marketing to public relations, customer loyalty management, and customer experience. Thank you very much, and please give a round of applause to Ariella. Our second panelist is a young, very, very energetic guy from Uganda, Mr. Frank Kamujisha. Frank is the founder of Ecoplastile in Uganda. Ecoplastile takes plastic waste, organizes communities to gather plastic waste and recycles it into very productive consumer goods. And Frank has been very popular, in the continent, has been traveling on different conferences, has been recognized as the Commonwealth Young Person of the Year, this year actually, and also won the Next Innovation Challenge in Japan and a number of other different accolades that would take very long to go through. So Frank, Frank will really be able to give us a great perspective on what it really takes to build businesses in the private sector. So please, round of applause for Frank. Our third panelist is Gaspar Abitsi. Gaspar has spent 18 years in conservation, wildlife conservation, and is currently the country director of the World Conservation Society in Gabon. He has a very strong interest in understanding land strategies, such as logging, mining, palm plantation, protection, and differentially thinking about how this impacts wildlife. So today, we're very excited to have Frank because he has a lot to share, Gaspar, sorry, he has a lot to share around conservation and what are we actually doing in the Commonwealth when it comes to conservation. So a round of applause to welcome Gaspar. And finally, our fourth panelist, Ms. Ruth Koshal, who is the Regional Director of the World Vision. Ruth is actually, focused largely on advocacy and external engagement at the World Vision and has been a visionary leader who's extremely passionate about empowering children and youth to fulfill their full potential and also to ensure that we're really being careful about how we're managing climate with regards to food insecurity and the effects of that. So Ruth will really have a lot to share around that. So a round of applause for Ruth as well, and I'm excited to see what our session brings. Thank you. Perfect. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, great, great. So we're going to start with a very, very big question, which keeps coming up when it comes to sustainability. This idea that there's a trade-off between economic growth and actually protecting our environment and living in tandem with our environment. And we have Ariella here, who has a lot of experience when it comes to, the Rwandan story of what Rwanda is actually doing to balance the two. So Ariella, we'd love to know from you, what do you think about this trade-off? Is there a trade-off? How has Rwanda actually, been able to manage the trade-off when it comes to plastics, when it comes to tourism, and even when it comes to very heavy carbon-producing, industries like manufacturing and construction?
First of all, welcome to Rwanda. We're really happy to have you here, everyone, and we hope you enjoy the country and network. I think that was a key thing that came even the previous session. So I'm really happy for having this platform. When it comes to Rwanda and sustainability, there's no trade-off actually. Sustainability or environment, climate change, and disaster management is actually central to the realization of our economic development. And this is anchored across all government policies and programs that ensure that there is the right initiatives, the right policies put in place that also translate in actually practical things. I would here mention the plastic ban of Rwanda that was taken over a decade ago. This came following a study that was done by our Ministry of Environment that showed really negative impact that was caused by plastic bags. And after, we had to actually put a law that stops that. What this has resulted into for Rwanda, without mentioning how I think many people have been saying it, the country has become green and clean across. It's not only in Kigali, it's across the country. So this has become a way of life. It has become something that everyone has embraced in their ways of life, and adopting this principle within the community has been obviously the key to the realization of achieving a plastic-free or a plastic bag-free country. And this has also created many opportunities for young people. They are leading, we'll get to that. They are leading in their roles in different ways. But specifically here, I mentioned that, because of this circular economy that has been created, thanks to the plastic ban and other environment protection policies and laws, there has been a number of companies and many jobs created because of that, through the circular and opportunities within the circular economy. So this is one of the examples, but we can go into even more details at some point and share more stories that have, coming from the plastic ban to, reducing greenhouse carbon emissions and so on.
Right, right. No, absolutely. Rwanda has taken a huge step when it comes to plastic bans, and we know that in many countries in the world, there's a big fear that this will come at the expense of jobs, and we've seen in Rwanda that GDP has actually grown, since the ban, not necessarily correlated. But to push on that same line around, has there been examples where actually, conservation has added to GDP, has added to economic growth?
Absolutely. Conservation is regarded in Rwanda as a productive sector, like any other sector. Conservation enables tourism. In Rwanda, we have positioned ourselves as a high-end tourism destination, promoting high yield and low volume to mitigate the impact on the environment, to mitigate the impact on the natural ecosystems in the national parks. Because of this positioning and this strategy and vision that we have for the country, tourism has been the first foreign currency earner of the economy for over a decade now. And tourism has also enabled that, the policies first have enabled that we are able to protect our protected areas better. Two of our national parks, Nyungwe National Park and Gishwati Mukora National Park, graduated through this process to become national parks. So we have about 9% of our territory as national parks, and that's where you find most of our diversity. And with measures taken to restock and for restoration as well for degraded ecosystems, we're able, for example, to restock locally extinct animals in the Akagera National Park, the only savanna park that we have in the country, to restore its big status, to rebalance the ecosystem in the national park. And this strategy and this positioning has attracted a number of renowned brands in ecotourism. Would say, I'll talk about the Singita, the one and only Wilderness Safaris, Mantis Collections, and African Parks, with whom we actually manage two of our national parks. So this has helped Rwanda to create opportunities through tourism, but also to create benefits for communities. For example, we have, through our tourism revenue sharing scheme, 10% of all park revenues are injected back into community livelihood projects. And we've seen these changing the mindset of communities through this community-led conservation approach, but them owning these assets and actually taking the lead in the protection and sustainable utilization of the ecosystems.
Right, right. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. And there's also the Ellen DeGeneres Center also for gorilla conservation and protection, which is a very, I mean, a great tourism attraction.
Tourism
as well.
attraction and also a platform for learning. As the center, like you rightly say, the campus provides better infrastructure, better technology, and better facilities for the students to learn as they, to practice as they learn, and also to be near where they actually will be able to, visit and do practical sessions within the Volcanoes National Park, for example, which is home to the mountain gorillas in Rwanda, which is also another interesting conservation story.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, let's go to you, Frank. So tell us a bit about, we heard from Ariella about plastics and about the government perspective on plastics and the policy around banning single use. But you went ahead and you decided you're going to start a company on this big problem in Uganda. So tell us a bit about the company and a bit about, what is there money to be made for the private sector in actually recycling and to, recycling plastics?
It's a very incredible question. I think there's quite a lot of money into the whole circular economy, and to be so specific in plastic waste. For example, at what we do in Uganda, we run a startup called EcoPlastile, and what we do is that we work with a network of youth and women whom we contract to collect plastic, and we pay them per kilogram of plastic they collect. And according to statistics, we increase their income from $2 to $7 per day, which is a more dignified job for, the normal person in the village. And once we get these plastics, we recycle them into sustainable roofing materials that we sell to the construction sector. We have the first ever circular roofing tile in my country, and we are currently operational in Uganda as well as in Kenya. There's a lot of money and a lot of potential in waste management. And it depends on how you really approach it, and especially today that consumers are becoming more aware of sustainability. They want to know what kind of materials have you used to make these products, what kind of, how are you paying the people you're working with to make these products, and what is the life value of these products. So there's a lot of opportunity, especially that the issue of sustainability is becoming more visible to even consumers.
Right. So, okay, so there is potential.
Yep.
There is money to be made.
Exactly.
Going back to the government perspective, do you think the government, in your context, in the markets that you operate in, do you feel like the governments are doing enough to support entrepreneurs like yourselves that are working in waste management and plastics waste management?
Well,
And what would you, let's go to action orientation. What would you recommend? What would you recommend?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question, but I will speak from the private sector perspective and as a young person who is doing an innovation into the circular economy. I think the governments are doing what they can as of today to make sure that they put platforms to enable innovations like ours to thrive. But I would really want to recommend that there is still a huge gap. If we are to really achieve sustainability, we cannot achieve sustainability without supporting SMEs. We need to make sure that we put in place sustainable finance. We need to unlock green finance. And when I talk about sustainable financing, I'm not meaning grants. I am looking at seed financing. We need to look at supporting innovations by giving them seed finance to be able to scale the innovations they are doing. And that's what sustainability calls for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So green finance is where you think the big gap is.
Yeah,
Do you struggle to get finance for EcoPlastiles?
Exactly. We struggle to get the financing for EcoPlastile. I mean, we've been lucky as a company to, leverage foreign, support from foundations like the Commonwealth and the United Nations Development Program and other partners. But I think from the investor perspective, because you realize that the sector is capital intensive, so it's very difficult to raise VC funding. So that's why I think unlocking green finance from governments and development partners is very critical to support these SMEs if we are to be able to scale the local innovations we are doing in our countries and be able to even create a much bigger impact.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. No, absolutely. Very important. All right, Gaspar. I think we've heard about the plastic waste management side of things. We've heard about the benefits of actually, getting into certain sectors for tourism and for economic growth. You have significant experience when it comes to conservation. And we have the post-2020 framework of biodiversity, which assessed a number of countries globally and pointed out certain gaps when it comes to conservation of specific areas. And Gabon had some very interesting success stories to share on that front. So I'd love if you can share with the audience what this framework is, and especially for an audience that might not understand really how conservation is really measured.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel and also to test my English because as maybe you may know, maybe my country, hopefully next week, will be part of the Commonwealth. So I'm just coming here as a precursor, and also I'm testing my English. So just thank you. Yeah, coming on the biodiversity framework, the most important thing is to know that it is a global strategic to try to see all countries around the world can come with a common objectives in terms of protecting biodiversity, restore the environment, and also to manage sustainability resources. And actually, under that new framework, which is being negotiated right now under the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity, and there are 21 action-oriented. And this new framework is also based on the past action plans, which was between 2011 and 2020, with some key targets. And one of the important targets on that past one was, for example, to protect marine ecosystem and also terrestrial ecosystem. For example, under what we call IKI target, this is the former plans, country was supposed to protect in marine side 10% of their economic exclusive zones and around 17% of their terrestrial area. For Gabon, for example, actually, in terms of marine zone, we have created 20 marine protected parks, which is represent around 26% of the EE zone. And in the terrestrial part of the country, if you take all different categories of protected area, we almost have around 23% of the territories already under protections. So that is a very key achievement. And to obtain that kind of result, there is some important factor. The first one, we need to have a very strong leadership on the top of the country. At the ministerial and the president level, those leaders need to be committed on that action. And then the second thing, very important also, is to transform this political will to concrete action on the field. And for that, we need people, we have capacity, we need people, we are very committed. And as I say, for Gabon right now, in terms of creative protected area, we have a quite interesting achievement. But now, under the new framework, countries is supposed to be committed on what we call 30-30. So 30% of the marine area under protection and 30% of terrestrial. And when I talk about Gabon, I can say that we can achieve that target. And another aspect is the way the country can engage on climate change. And we know that Gabon is part of the Congo Basin forest, which is one of the most important in terms of the carbon sequestrations, but also in terms of providing rain to other countries in Africa. What people don't know is that the Congo Basin forest is important to create, for example, rain on the Sahara area and even here in the eastern part of Africa. The rain we have, thanks to the phenomenon of what we call evapotranspiration, come from forest. And where countries are committed to protect that forest, with putting in place some political in terms of the sustainable management of forestry, that is something very key. And in Gabon, there are about 12 years ago, the government just decided to have a ban on the exportation of log. And the objective was to improve the value chain, to transform this logging on the country, and also to push all logging concessions to be engaged on the most best standard in terms of sustainable management of forest.
Right, absolutely. But then there's this whole issue of, okay, so Gabon has managed to, preserve and protect a large area for marine, but there's also a huge gap in the targets that was, that was on that assessment that was made. So what do you think, what are the gaps, if you can take us through those gaps and why?
I do think in terms of gap, I can say also, because I'm talking a lot about success, but those success on conservation have also some new issues. For example, in a country like Gabon, and in a lot of countries in Africa, when we succeed on conservation of wildlife, we have other issues with human and wildlife conflicts. For example, in Gabon, that is a very big issue. We succeed to protect, for example, elephant, and Gabon right now have 97,000 forest elephant, and is 70% of the remaining forest elephant in Africa. And those elephants are everywhere in the country. 90% of the country we have elephants. And the country, Gabon is like UK, with only 2 million people. And the rural household represent around 300,000 people. So just to say that each rural household in Gabon coexists with 2 elephants. So that is another issue, because we can succeed on conservation, but at the same time, we can have also other problems. And in terms of gap, we know that on this kind of strategy, there is a lot of commitment to try to mitigate and to support the country we are invest on conservation. And that commitment is in terms of finance. And right now, they still have this problem, because all of those countries in Africa, we try to manage their natural resources. They need more support in terms of finance to have those kind of policies to be more effective on the field.
So finance. Green finance.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And also, because we are talking about youth, there is an interesting story in Gabon between conservation and youth. There are about 15 years ago, we started a program on sea turtles, to monitor sea turtles. And that program was based, until now, is based on local NGOs, and under that local NGOs, the majority of the field assistants are youth. And that program helped Gabon to show that Gabon is one of the key places for the sea turtles. There is one specific species called leatherback turtles, and in Gabon there are around 100% of those sea turtles population, and is representing 100,000 individuals we come to nesting in Gabon. And that program was mostly supported and implemented by youth until now along all Gabon coastal area. And they work in terms of monitor, but also they work in terms of awareness on different schools in the country. So that is also the way to show that youth can be engaged on concrete action. We don't need to just look for the future. As someone say here, the future is now, and there is some concrete action on which youth can be engaged to play a key role on those issues.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're
But
welcome.
you jumped the gun on that one. I was going to get to the question.
No problem. You're welcome.
No, that's a beautiful story.
Sure.
And the role of youth, and we want to come back actually to the other panelists. But before that, very quickly, Ruth, I think, you know, we can't end the session or we can't have a session without talking about food insecurity. And the fact that, you know, climate is severely affecting how much food we have to eat, and we have so many people on the brink of starvation as we speak now. So tell us a bit about that link between the climate and food insecurity and what's being done about that.
Very much. I also appreciate the other panelists and their interventions. What I'd like to share is that one of the unfortunate aftershocks of climate change is food insecurity. And this could be caused because of drought, floods, and other hazards. Now, specifically, when we look at, for example, Eastern Africa, there are over 31 million people who are food insecure currently. And that is broader, not just East Africa, but Eastern Africa. In addition, we have the Horn of Africa. And specifically when we look at Kenya, Somalia, as well as that particular region, we have so many people who are food insecure. And we have a number between 12 to 13. Now, what is the issue around this? When we also look at the children, there's a lot of malnutrition. And we have some figures which are very unfortunate. We have the figure of 5.7 million children in the Horn of Africa that are food insecure. This has led several organizations, including World Vision, to have a global hunger response. And the global hunger response currently covers 24 countries, of which 15 are in Africa. But in addition to that, we cannot look at climate change in isolation. There's a lot of discourse around looking at the threats of climate change linked to COVID-19, as well as thinking around the other Cs. So recently there was the AU Humanitarian Summit, and during the AU Humanitarian Summit in Malabo, we were actually talking about the 4 Cs of food insecurity related to climate change. And as I just mentioned right now, this includes COVID-19, climate change, conflict, and another one which is the cost of food. I mean, we have had several examples from children and youth. And one policy brief that World Vision developed in collaboration with other civil society organizations, we had a specific story where a young girl told us, you know, before we would go to the market with maybe the equivalent of $1. And that $1 would enable us to buy fish, rice, bread, and so many things. But now when we go to the market, that $1, we cannot even buy fish. So climate change and food insecurity are interlinked. And also we need to think about how do humanitarian workers, humanitarian agencies collaborate very closely with the government, with the youth, and also looking how we can address working together with donors and other development partners. This triple threat has become now the 4 Cs and enables us to work together. And I know we're going to also be talking about the role of youth, so I'm not going to preempt that question.
But maybe you can tell us a bit about, okay, we see this huge impact. We see this huge impact on the cost of food, and we all feel it right now with the cost of food. So what's the solution? Or what are the various interventions to, you know, especially linking to food insecurity and climate in terms of addressing climate change with the lens of food insecurity?
Yes, I think there are different ways we can think about solutions, but I'll also turn those into recommendations. Because first of all, we have donors who have been very generous, and there have been various pledging conferences. So we really would like to continue to call on donors to provide funding, noting that there's a lot of attention in the Ukraine, and rightfully so, but I also would like us to think about the situation in the Horn of Africa, Eastern Africa, and the Central Sahel as well. And then secondly, we also want to look at the role of youth. And that is also something that we're going to be discussing shortly. But youth have very good innovative ideas. I just want to bring up another small workshop or conference we had. So before the African Union Humanitarian Summit, there was a pre-summit for youth. And youth had the opportunity to share and talk about what do they see as some of the solutions in addressing climate change, food insecurity. And they said, we would also like to be involved in COP27, not just at the meeting as delegates, but we want to be involved in the planning, sharing our experience, innovative ideas. And another thing I'd like to also link it with is the importance of looking at the role of even faith leaders. They're very influential in our communities, and it's also good to involve them in addressing how can we understand the situation of food insecurity as it relates to climate justice.
Right, right. So we've heard two words that have constantly come up: finance, youth. Finance, youth. So finance, I don't know how many financiers we have in the room, so maybe we can put that aside for now. But youth is a very important one. So I'd love to hear from you, actually, Frank, as the youngest of us all. I'd love to hear from you, what inspired you to really take action? We've heard so much about taking control. What inspired you to take action, and what words do you have for the youth in terms of getting involved when it comes to sustainability?
That's a very fantastic question. I think one of the things that actually inspired the start of EcoPlastyle was my personal story. I got a chance to live in a slum community, and this is where I firsthand saw the consequences of poor plastic waste disposal, with a lot of plastics littering everywhere in streets, clogging sewers, and even encroaching onto our homes. But this also came at a time when my government had tried to put a ban on plastic waste, and because of people's behavior, it seemed like not working. It put a ban and the ban failed. The second time it tried, and the same thing happened. And so I was like, no, this could be a big opportunity for the private sector, and especially for young people like me. And so we started to, collect plastic. And at first we were just collecting plastic and selling these plastics to other companies. But later on, also on the way, I discovered that actually selling plastic to other companies was not actually, solving a bigger problem. So we thought of how can we add value to this plastic waste ourselves. And so we started recycling and making roofing tiles. And since 2019, we've been able to, create more than 180 green jobs, especially for youth and women, across the plastic value chain. And this has enabled us to empower more than 1,500 people whom we empower indirectly. And these are mothers who pick waste everywhere in the community and selling to our different agents. So I think as young people, especially youth in the Commonwealth countries, there's a huge potential to do. For example, I know of a company in Nigeria. It's called Social Care. So what Social Care does is that they offer health care to women, youth and women, in exchange for plastic waste. So plastic waste is becoming an exchange, a mode of exchange to access some of the, services that, some of the vulnerable people couldn't afford to get. So you realize that there is a lot of opportunities, and more so with the introduction of digitalization. I think there is immense opportunities when you look at solving issues of climate change, sustainability, using technology. So there's a lot that we can do with solving the problems of climate change, sustainability, especially leveraging technology.
Right,
Yeah.
Right, absolutely, yes. Leveraging technology and taking things into your own hands and trying entrepreneurial solutions.
Exactly.
And having the courage to take a risk.
Exactly. Of course,
Right.
you really must be, ready to take a risk. Like, for example, my story, I used to, before I started the company, I was working with a university. I was a director of estates in a university at a very young age. So I took a risk to, quit my job at the age of 26. It sounded a little bit crazy because I didn't know what I was going to do, but I really left my job and went to, pursue a career in, waste scavenging for plastic waste. So you must be really ready to take a risk. And yeah, they will talk a lot, but you have to follow your passion and go for something that you feel is going to contribute, to making this world a better place for humanity and the planet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So take a risk. Ariella, on your side, when it comes to young people, and we've heard actually from Honorable Minister the importance of young people influencing policy. What are your thoughts? How can young people really participate, especially when it comes to developing policies that need to balance between economic growth and actual environmental protection?
I really like the fact, or something that was said earlier, before we joined the stage, the future is now. The future is really now, and young people need to take charge, like, how the theme of the conference. But we also need to remember, and I like what Frank just said, that risks are necessary. Taking the risk is necessary. It comes with taking responsibility. And the youth has to be given the space for them to take responsibility, to understand that this is where we are headed. The earth is finite. There are more and more examples of incidents or things that show that the earth is finite, with shrinking agricultural land, shrinking wild spaces, scarcity of water. All these examples that show that we need to take the future, we talk about the future now. So if the consequences of what the earth is going to be are not discussed today with who will be there tomorrow, then that's not the right way of doing things. And that's why in Rwanda, our youth takes center stage in negotiations at climate change or climate summits. So we always travel with our youth as part of the Rwanda delegation, so that they understand and take and also get inspiration from those conversations. What this helps, it breaks down the very buzzwords of sustainability and climate change into practical things that people can do. And I'm really inspired by the initiatives that some of the youth members have done, creating organizations that rally other youth members into, the cause of climate change, and also taking, into consideration that I think we were discussing earlier that, and also I think the minister said it, that environment should be part of the curricula, should be part of what people learn at school. So these youth environment clubs are actually, helping instilling those skills and that knowledge at that age. And that what translates into, you'll find innovative entrepreneurship and digital transformation that the youth is really ready to embrace more than anyone else, impacting and creating the right impact in the economy and in the community. There are a few examples of some companies like West Zone, which is an app that helps connect people who want to recycle their items with the recycling industries. There is also a company of some young people that recycles plastic waste into pavers that are used in construction. So these are some of the examples that could not have been possible if youth had not understood and the concept of sustainability.
Yeah, but for the young people like in the audience, when it comes to actually influencing policy, and that's really something that has come up over and over again. How do young people not only bootstrap and get to the ground and set up companies, but how are they influencing policy? So one thing that you're saying is we as governments need to create space for young people to be part of these forums and to be part of these events. COP27, something we've been talking about, for young people to engage.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that comes to mind when it comes to systemic changes?
In conservation, we have a number of initiatives as well in wildlife conservation of young people taking the lead and creating cooperatives that are actually influencing some of the policies. And this has resulted into, the government or RDB taking an initiative of making sure that those cooperatives are actually benefiting from the activities within the national parks. And those are schemes and policies and strategies that wouldn't have been possible if the youth wasn't given the space to be listened.
Right, so organizing yourself in groups so that you can really advocate with the numbers and influence. And Gaspar, what do you think about this when it comes to conservation? The role of youth in conservation and in policy influence?
I do think there is a different kind of approach. For example, as we said, acting on the field is something very important. I can, for example, see example in Gabon with bushmeat. As we know, we have all those efforts to try to protect the wildlife. For example, in Gabon, the country, maybe 70% is the same in all countries in Africa of the population are youth. And now we can see the change on the way they eat. We don't need, for example, to go and try to just, eliminate the bushmeat market because they don't like to go and eat bushmeat. And we can see that change because a lot of youth are now living on cities and they just have a kind of regulation in terms of their preference for bushmeat because the majority of those youth are on city, and also, as I say, they have concrete action. I take the example of sea turtles, but we have also another example in terms of mangroves. In Gabon, we have a local NGOs because there are a lot of local NGOs with youth. We are very committed on conservation, and there are about 5 years now to restore mangrove. That is something people don't think about, but now they start to put that project in place. And a lot of people are aware of the importance of mangrove and to try to take action. But it was youth. It was a local NGOs with just only youth. I do think the elders were about 23 years. But at the moment, they still are on the field. So, and Gabon is working to try to put in place a specific regulation on mangroves. And that is thanks to the job those young people have been done. So I do think it's important. Action is important.
Yeah.
And the way also people try to just be on the field and at the same time try to advocate can help also to just improve policy. So yeah, it's important. Of course, we also have other formal fora for youth, but definitely action advocacy is very important to try to make the difference in terms of improving the policy.
Right, yeah. Seems to be the recurring theme is just act, see the opportunity and act, see the opportunity and act, and then act in numbers and act to be able to mobilize and advocate.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Ruth? You have strong thoughts around youth, especially when it comes to food insecurity.
Yes, I think, the session before this was talking about meaningful youth participation. And I just want to respond with a small story and a narrative because World Vision has a project that is funded by the European Union, and it's a collaboration between youth in Ireland and youth in Tanzania, and it's called Sauti Youth. And this project enables youth in Ireland and youth in Tanzania to collaborate, to discuss some of the environmental challenges they're having, some of the solutions they had. And initially I thought this was very interesting because in Tanzania we speak Swahili. In Ireland they speak English, but their accent is a bit different from what we're used to. So the youth came together and they were very good in this project talking about the need to look at water and hygiene. And I hadn't thought about that. And they said, take, for example, a young woman in Tanzania. She's responsible for collecting water. Now, with climate change, initially the river or the stream was closer. Over time, she has to walk further and further away. What does that mean? She's also being insecure in terms of her own protection. She might walk further, but she might be susceptible to violence. So they were trying to say, you know, food insecurity, climate change can also be linked to violence against women and girls. I had not seen that connection until they started talking about it. But I think one of the things that also came up in the AU Humanitarian Summit, pre-Youth Summit, was they talked about involving youth in disaster risk reduction. They said they can come up with very innovative ways to think about that. And then thirdly, the youth also were coming up and saying, what about land? So they said, food insecurity also requires good agriculture, but you need to involve us in land issues. We usually are not the ones who own land. And you know, by listening to youth, I think that gave us a very interesting perspective. But I just want to finally say that this always comes about through collaboration with the government as the lead, with development partners and donors providing the financing, and civil society organizations being able to work with the most vulnerable women, youth, and children.
Right, right. Thank you very, very much for that. This was, you know, so fascinating to hear the story of sustainability from so many different angles. And each of you have very different angles when you look at sustainability, almost to the point where, you know, it was hard to think through, okay, how are we weaving in this conversation? And because sustainability, that word, you know, is taken so differently by so many different people. So as a quick, and I'm just looking at the time, it would be so great to have been able to take questions. But because of the time, we'll wrap up. One quick line on what is sustainability to you? And what is that sustainable world that you imagine when you think about sustainability? And maybe we can start, Ariella.
Sustainability is a way of life, and it's in. We should look at it as not an alien concept, but rather as something that is anchored within everything that we do socially and economically, making sure that those decisions that we make for social being or our economic well-being are not compromising, you know, the availability of whatever resources we're enjoying today, compromising the availability for those that will come after us.
Right.
So sustainability should be a lifestyle.
Sustainability should be a lifestyle. Frank.
Great. I think, to me, from the private sector perspective, sustainability is the new gold. Companies that will be able to work around the triple bottom line of environmental, economical, and social perspective of the operations will become the most preferred companies in the world. Sustainability is the new gold.
Sustainability is the new gold.
Yep.
And you are making money out of it, so.
Exactly, absolutely, yes.
Gaspar.
Yeah, you see, the environment is a complex and dynamic system with a lot of emerging problems and issues. We are talking about the COVID-19. So for me, sustainability might be viewed not like a fixed destination, but like a journey. And to deal with that, you need to ensure that all stakeholders at all levels can come with their imagination and their solutions. And now we are talking about youth, and in general, youth have a lot of ideas, they have dreams, and sometimes solutions come from them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Ruth, you finish us off.
Yes, thank you. For me, sustainability is the opportunity for children, youth, and communities to live life in all its fullness and to fulfill their potential in all areas of education, health, water, and livelihoods. so that what they're doing today does not harm future generations, especially when we think of the most vulnerable, women, children, and youth.
That's beautiful. To live life in all its fullness. And with that, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And thank you to our panelists, Ruth, Gaspar, Frank, Ariella. It's been a pleasure to host this. And please, let's continue living life in all its fullness. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Can we get a big round of applause once again for our Plenary 2, Reimagining Sustainability. Thank you so much to our moderator and to all our panelists. And they're just going to grab a quick picture right there. A quick picture. And we know that sustainability is a big item on the agenda now. And of course, the depth of the discussion, the richness of the discussion itself has been leading us to, of course, look and examine at new ways in which we could approach sustainability overall.
Absolutely. While they are taking their photo, we did want to let you know that buses for some of our guests here who are living in Kigali and would like to get their rides home, they are leaving now. So if you will be leaving us here, please go and find the bus. After this, we will also be breaking for a very brief tea break, and then we'll have the last session of the day before the evening event. So if you are based in Kigali and need your ride home, the buses are leaving very shortly, so please make your way out to the buses, and for everyone else, we will be breaking for a short tea break now.
So anyone without a badge, your transport is outside. So if you can just meet your bus and be able to head back home at this moment. All right, and we're now taking our tea break. So grab some coffee, it's right outside on your left-hand side. And then we'll be back in 20 minutes.